Dr. Saundra, I am so thrilled to be joined by you today on the show. Thank you so much for being my guest.
Thank you, Rebecca, for having me.
I know this is going to be fun. I feel like we've ran in similar circles for a while, but it's exciting to get to have some FaceTime and chat for the first time, which is really fun. So I love when people get to hear the beginning of like in real life friendship. So I feel like this is what's happening. So this is fun. And I am excited to talk about the lies that tend to cripple us as women. This is something that you are super passionate about and you've written a lot about, you speak a lot about. And so I would love, as we get started, for you to just share, why is this work in the lives of women particularly so important to you?
Well, I feel like this is my own personal journey. This is what I've seen myself have to work through and battle through at times. And I see it so often in others. I find that oftentimes these 7 areas in particular that I discuss happen to be the ones that keep us from living out God's fullness in our lives. They keep us in this kind of held back, sheltered in place, which is not really what God wants for us. He doesn't want us to feel as if we're confined, but to feel the freedom to fully be who He's created us to be. And so that's what I feel like these lies do. And most of them are just that. They're lies. They're not the truth. They're not something that's grounded in scripture or fact. They're things we've told ourselves, and that we're basically limiting ourselves with these things that we are thinking and saying.
Yeah. And one of the things that you talk about that I want to dig into, and it's a term that some of us have probably heard, but I'd love to unpack it a little more, is this idea of a limiting belief. I think we've many of us probably heard of that, but maybe we've not done the hard heart work of actually really digging into what are those in our lives? How do we overcome those? So let's maybe start real high level with what is a limiting belief, and then what might be some examples of how that plays out in our lives.
Yeah, so a limiting belief is a thought that you have accepted as truth for you. Because really, the only truth that is effective and active in your life is the one that you believe. And so if you believe that, marriage is hard, then you're going to approach it in such a way. You're going to always be approaching it from this negative kind of, this is going to be very difficult mindset. And so what I find is when we have these limiting type beliefs, we start building out that world because that is our expectation. And we don't allow any grace. We don't allow God to kind of infuse His presence. We don't allow the truth of what the Word of God says to be active in our lives because we are functioning not under that biblical precept.
Yeah. Yeah. So what might be a couple, other than marriage is hard? Let's give a couple more examples of what that might look like in our lives that you see maybe often.
Yeah, the one I see very often is I'm always going to be struggling with money. I can't tell you how many people I hear say things like that. Like, money's always hard to come by. It's very difficult to hold on to money. And these very same people will find that their life kind of reflects exactly what they're saying. Or they'll say things like, my kids are never doing as good as other people's kids. They're creating these worlds really with their words and in their way of viewing and thinking about things in such a way that they are functioning under that belief. I sometimes see women say, I'm never going to be good enough to do that. Or the one I hear most often, I could never, if they don't have the potential for growth or they don't have the potential to expand. The scripture says we grow from glory to glory. So there's never a time when you're looking at someone else's life and you're thinking, well, I would never be able to, because you're basically saying, I don't have the capacity to grow or to learn or to expand.
That's good. Okay, I have a theory that I want to talk about. This is completely off script. So it goes back to a conversation I had with one of my best friends a couple of years ago. We both at that time did not have children. They have since then had their first child. My friend and her husband and I have only been married a couple of years, so we do not have children yet. But we were on a walk one day, and she was recounting this conversation she had had with one of her mentors, where her mentor had realized that every time her mentor talked about motherhood with my friend, she was catching herself talking about it from a negative perspective and talking about all the hardships of motherhood. And she came to my friend Becca and she said, Becca, I'm realizing that I am probably giving you a little bit of some false expectations. Yes, motherhood is hard, but I don't feel like I've shared enough of the joys of it with you. And so I'm repenting of that, and I want to do better. And Becca came to me, and she was just processing it with me, and she said, I just thought that was the most kind thing a friend could do, is realize, like, I'm not telling you the full story, and actually it's a lot better than what I've told you. And so specific to motherhood, we have a lot of women listening who are in that space where maybe they're married, or they hope to be married one day but do not yet have children. And I think we have sort of this epidemic of kind of joking about the hardships of motherhood, to the point where I think a lot of women worry, like, well, is this for me? If it's this bad, is motherhood for me? And I'm wondering, do you see the same thing happening specific to motherhood?
I think these lies can really function in any area in our lives, particularly any area where we have a bit of uncertainty, or a lot of uncertainty, I should say, because if you have just a bit of uncertainty, you will kind of feel like, oh, I can still kind of manage this. If there's an area where there's a lot of uncertainty, and raising children, you don't know what you're doing. I mean, you are basically moving by the grace of God, whether you want to admit it or not. You really come into that situation feeling very vulnerable, and most of us fight vulnerability. And motherhood and parenting is a vulnerable situation where, just like your friend's mentor had to admit something that she didn't do that was beneficial to her, most parents should have that very same conversation with their children, because they didn't come with a manual. We're doing the best we can. And so I think it's part of the process with that is really, yes, mothers will experience some of these different lies and mental blocks and mindsets. But I think it's also just as important to recognize that just because you have experienced or walked within a lie doesn't mean you have to stay there. Sometimes that walking through it actually is what helps you be able to help your children more, because you're able to then turn around and say, you know what, I've been functioning under a mindset of perfectionism, and I've been casting that off on you as well. And I'm sorry that I made you feel like if you didn't get an A, that you weren't good enough. Because sometimes that's what we're feeling. If we didn't hit it right on the mark, we weren't good enough. And so we project that onto our children. So I think it's important to recognize when we have these mindsets that are functioning, because typically we do pass them on if we don't recognize them.
Hey friends, quick break in this conversation to remind you of something. If you are loving the show, you're loving the conversations we're having, it would mean the absolute world to me if you would leave a rating and a written review on Apple Podcasts for Radical Radiance. When that happens, when more of those happen, the show gets put in front of more women, and in turn, it allows them the opportunity to take part in conversations that will show them more about what it looks like to radiate the heart of Jesus. Can't think of anything better than that. So it would mean the world to me if you would take just 2 minutes of your time and leave a rating and a written review. I'd love to hear what you think. Now, let's get back to the conversation.
Yeah. That's so good. Well, I wanted to have this conversation with you because you have, like we said, you've written and you've spoken a lot about this area in particular, and you have a book called Set Free to Live Free, where you talk about breaking through the 7 lies that you see women telling themselves. And I always say this when I talk to authors: I don't want you to give away all of your secrets, because I want people to go grab your book. So that's the goal here, right? But would you walk us through a little bit of maybe some of these lies that we can expect to maybe, after this conversation, begin to maybe see a little more clearly in our lives? How do we recognize those so that we can begin taking those steps forward towards freedom?
Yeah, well, the different areas of the 7 lies, just to kind of cover what they include areas like perfection, image, envy, control, balance, emotions, and limits. These are the 7 big areas that are covered. And one of the main ones I would probably say that I would start with to make sure that most women are aware of is this lie based around balance. I think too often we talk about getting work-life balance, and it's something we strive for. It's something we talk about. You see it in all the magazines, but it's really a lie, because you never really want to have your life where work is on one side and your family's on the other, and they're like these two things that are teeter-tottering. When one goes up, the other one goes down. I mean, that's not healthy. What you're really wanting is integrated work life, where you are able to have a harmony within it, where there's
Yeah.
a grace, an ebb and a flow, where they actually move together in a way that actually is harmonious. And so I think that's a huge lie that has many women feeling very distressed because they feel like they have to make a choice. Am I going to be a mom? Am I going to be an entrepreneur? Am I going to be, a CEO or homeschool or whatever it is? Am I going to have to choose between different parts of myself when really you're able to integrate some of these things so that there isn't this stress and pull all the time? That you
Yeah.
actually can move within the grace of God, within the different things he's called you to do.
That's so good. Okay, I'm curious, as this episode releases, we'll be approaching the 2-year mark of when the pandemic hit our world. And I'm curious, as you talk to women, as you speak to women, what are you seeing as some of the effects that the pandemic has had, maybe specific to mental health in the lives of women that maybe are impacting these lives that we believe?
Well, one of my other books is called Sacred Rest, and there's research that I do based around rest and how people experience rest and recover from burnout and stress and challenges. And we have an assessment that a lot of people have taken that shows me kind of how people are responding to different types of challenges within their lives. And so with that assessment, what we've seen just through the pandemic is that most people have experienced a lot of mental rest deficits and what we call sensory rest deficits. And so one of the things that we're noticing, particularly with women, is that they have a hard time kind of turning off their mind when they're over processing, and when there's a lot of new challenges that are going on, we go into problem solving mode, and that problem solving mode sometimes keeps the brain kind of chronically active and moving. And so it becomes difficult to carve out, so to speak, time for rest, because we're thinking, well, there's so much stuff to be done. And what happens in the meantime is they become more and more depleted, which then affects your attitude and your personality, which then affects your relationships. And they don't recognize kind of the snowball effect it's having on their life simply because of this one area not being maintained, simply because of not recognizing the value of actually taking some time for themselves and pouring back into themselves so that they're able to then pour from a healthier place within their family and relationships.
That's good. That's good. Well, another place that I think is so important for us to talk about as it pertains to this is our friendships and people who are safe places for us. That's a phrase that you use. And I'd love to hear more about what are some things that you maybe look for, you want us to look for to figure out, what does it mean to be a safe place for somebody? How do we do that? And how do we find that, I guess, is the best way to phrase the question.
Yes, that's a great question. And it really is based around that lie that we should hide our emotions all the time, and that emotions are only for crazy women, for women who can't, keep it together. We all have emotions. We all have to deal and learn how to manage our emotions. But to be able to have a healthy place with emotions, you do need to have those people in your life that you can be transparent with. It's through that transparency, that vulnerability, that we actually build up those soul connections and those deeper heart relations. Now, how you do that is really by having moments where you test the waters, so to speak. So I never recommend you meet a group of women for the very first time. You've never laid eyes on them. They've never laid eyes on you. You don't know anything about them, their personality, to just be completely vulnerable and tell them everything that's about you and be completely transparent. Typically, that does not feel safe because it oftentimes is not safe. And so what you're wanting to do is test the waters. So yes, go hang out with that group of women. It's got women, be a fly on the wall for a couple of gatherings, share a little, see what happens, evaluate how they respond to other people sharing. I give this example. I went to a women's group one time where I'm the new woman. I didn't know anybody there, and I'm sitting around and I'm listening to them talk, like a little break when everybody was getting up to do something and get coffee while, we were waiting for the person to come back to start back up our session. One woman went to the bathroom and we're sitting there, and like the other people in the group kind of leaned in and said, should we talk to her about such and such and such? And I'm like, what in the world are they talking about? I don't know what conversation we're having right now. And this other woman goes, well, did you hear? And the second I heard just the tone of her voice, I was like, this is not a safe place. That woman who just left, he thinks these people are like are a safe place. So she's sharing things with them, and they are not receiving it as people who are safe to receive that information.
Yeah.
They're receiving it as gossip.
Yeah.
And so you want to take some time to have moments where you are in observation to see if this is a safe place. And when you start seeing that people are very sincere, the one thing that came out of that, one woman was like, you guys, we really shouldn't be talking about this when she's not here. We should talk about it when she's here. That woman was a safe place. She is safe. So that's the person that I invite out to coffee. That's the person that you start building a true relationship with, because she has shown that she is safe. She's known within the group. And she's not afraid to say this isn't right, which takes a bold, courageous person to say that, because oftentimes people will just kind of go with the group, and that's not always safe either. You want someone who has some backbone, but also compassion. Those are the safe people in your life.
Yeah. I have an example that I talk about when I talk about this, of a friend that I had when I lived in Knoxville, Tennessee. When I married my husband, he's a pastor down here in South Mississippi where we live now. And so when we got married, I left big SEC college town life to move to a town of 12,000 people and be a pastor's wife. So you can imagine the culture shock. And the first year or so after we got married, it was, I flipped my life upside down pretty much. There was nothing about my life that was the same. It was a beautiful new season of ministry, but it was also very hard. And I have a friend that lives in Knoxville. And one of the things we would do when I would come into town is we would go get pizza from this one particular place that we ate all the time when I lived there. And it was easy for us to go have dinner on a Friday night. We would go get pizza from that place that just kind of felt like home. And we would bring it back to her house, and we would change into our pajamas, and we would eat pizza until we were sick. And we would stay up until like 1 a.m. in the morning. And I could say anything in front of her. Everything was safe in her living room, right? And so when I think of a safe place, her living room, eating pizza from this one particular wood grill or wood-fired pizza place, that is what I think of. And so when I think about my friendships, like, I want to be that living room space for other people too, And so I think there are so many spaces like you're saying, and moments where we have the opportunity to do that, like to say the bold thing in a group when gossip is present, or, we could name many other instances where we have the opportunity to create that for other people. And I think that really matters,
It absolutely does, because so often many of us in particular tend to hold quite a bit of emotional labor. So we stay emotionally fatigued because you mentioned the pandemic. During the pandemic, many parents held on to significant emotional labor because they didn't want their kids to get worried. So, dad may have had their job laid off. Mom may have had her job laid off. They may be barely making it. And the kids think everything's great because the parents are holding all of that emotional labor themselves to prevent the kids from being stressed or scared or afraid. And so when, that happens, we have to recognize that just because you don't verbalize your emotions doesn't take the emotional strain of them off of you. You have to have times when you lay down that burden and you have the ability to kind of release it. And that's what having those people that you can share that information with. It's not that they're going to solve the problem. It's just that they're allowing you space to get it out of you so that you don't have to keep carrying the load of that.
Yeah, that's so good. Well, there is a question that I ask all of our guests that come on the show. It's my favorite question, and it comes back to kind of the direction God led me for the podcast, which was Psalm 34:5. It says, "Those who look to him are radiant, and their faces are never covered in shame." So we love around here talking about, what does it look like when we keep our eyes fixed on him, and that idea of radiance being what happens in us when we spend time in the presence of God. And so the question I love asking is, Dr. Saundra, what about Jesus makes you radiant?
I love that question. When I think about that, just the moment you said the word radiance, what came to mind is in the book. It was the very last chapter, the very last thing I wrote. And I wasn't even going to put it in there, but my editor said, you've got to include that. I talk about much of what I share about in the book are my experiences with female patients and working with them. Those women who shared with me on this level and who allow me to be that safe place as their physician and also their friend at this point, I actually call them part of a diamond society. It's part of a group of people who have gone through kind of the dirt of life, have gone through hard stuff, who have had pressure and heat kind of applied to the different areas of their life. And they go through this place of being concealed and hidden where nobody knows who they are, and they don't even really know who they are. And then, as time goes, you see them kind of emerge, just like a diamond does, emerging out of the earth. And then there's this time where it's finally kind of presented, and it becomes an adoration that maybe goes in a place of prominence where other people can see. And so when I think of the word radiance, I feel like that is what God and that is what Jesus means to me. It's a leading from this place of really of the pressure and the heat and the concealment and all of those things that seem so hard, to this place where he's like, okay, you came through all of that. Now let every facet of who you are, every imperfection, every part of you that reflects who I am, let it be visible to the world, and don't be ashamed of any aspect of it, because all of it is radiant for me.
That's so good. So beautiful. Well, I am so grateful for the work that you do for women, to encourage them and to set them free from these lies that we so often feel so trapped by. And so I want to say the name of your book one more time: Set Free to Live Free. And it was Sacred Rest. Is that the name of the other one? Did I catch that right?
Yes, the other book is called Sacred Rest.
Sacred Rest. I thought so. Okay. So I want you to share with people, where can they find you? Where can they grab both of these books? Share all that with us.
Yes, well, my blog is at ichoosemybestlife.com, and that's where you can get information about my books and resources and different things as well. I have a podcast as well by the same name, I Choose My Best Life. And the books are available really wherever books are sold. So definitely on Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, and all of those places.
Well, I'm so grateful for your work and your encouragement today. Thank you so much for being with me.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.